What happens when a mother is left out of her own family photo? The choice she made next left everyone questioning what family truly means. Evelyn Drake had always believed her family to be close-knit, held together by the unspoken glue of tradition and shared history. She was the matriarch, the voice of reason, the one who remembered everyone's birthdays and always brought an extra pie to Thanksgiving. Her home, a rambling colonial in the suburbs, had been the gathering place for decades. Photographs lined every wall: babies in bonnets, toddlers with scraped knees, graduations, weddings, birthdays. In every image, Evelyn stood at the center, sometimes beaming, sometimes wiping away a tear, but always present. This year, however, was different. The annual Drake family reunion was being hosted by her eldest daughter, Linda, at her sprawling new home. Linda was proud of her success, a fact she made sure to remind everyone of, both subtly and not. She wanted things to be perfect: matching linens, a catered lunch, and, of course, a professional family photographer. Evelyn, used to more casual affairs, felt out of place from the moment she walked in. The house was immaculate, but it didn't smell like family. It smelled like lemon polish and something expensive simmering on the stove. The gathering was larger than usual, with distant cousins and even a few family friends in attendance. Linda floated from group to group in a crisp dress, her smile strained at the edges. Evelyn made her way through the crowd, handing out hugs, admiring children's artwork, and laughing with her youngest granddaughter over a silly joke. She kept an eye on the clock, waiting for the moment when tradition would take over and everyone would crowd together for the big family photo. After lunch, Linda's husband called out, "Everyone outside for the photo." The photographer, a man with a camera the size of a bread box, ushered people onto the back lawn. The children fidgeted, the adults fussed with hair and straightened collars. Evelyn started to make her way forward, but Linda stopped her with a gentle hand. "Mom, maybe you should sit this one out. We're just doing the younger generation for this shot." Evelyn froze. She tried to laugh it off, but her hands shook. "Oh, I see. Well, I'll just wait here then." She stood back, heart pounding, watching as her children, grandchildren, and even Linda's in-laws arranged themselves in front of the old oak tree. The photographer took dozens of shots, encouraging everyone to act natural and smile like you mean it. No one seemed to notice Evelyn standing alone at the patio's edge, her shadow spilling across the bricks. After the pictures, Linda bustled back inside. "You're still here, Mom? I thought you'd want to relax in the sun." Evelyn forced a smile and joined a group of cousins, trying to shake the chill that had crept into her bones. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Evelyn helped clear dishes, handed out leftover cake, and made small talk with relatives who seemed to have forgotten she was the one who'd started this tradition so long ago. When it was time to leave, Linda hugged her tightly. "Thanks for coming, Mom. The kids loved seeing you." Evelyn hugged her back, careful not to let her hurt show. That night, at home, she wandered through her hallway of family photos. She studied the faces, the generations she had nurtured. In every picture, she was there, sometimes at the center, sometimes on the edge, but always included. She thought of the afternoon's photo, her absence a blank space that would live in the family album forever. For the first time in her life, Evelyn wondered if she had given too much, asked too little, and taught her children that her presence was optional, even disposable. She sat at her kitchen table, the silence of her house pressing in, and wrote in her journal, "How do you become invisible to the people you made visible in the world?" Evelyn made herself a cup of tea, stared into the dark, and began to imagine what it would mean to reclaim her worth, not with anger, but with clarity. She was tired of being overlooked. Something inside her had changed, and as the hours ticked by, the first seeds of resolve began to take root. The days after the reunion settled like dust over Evelyn's life, covering everything with a faint ache she couldn't shake. She tried to brush off the hurt, telling herself it was just a misunderstanding or a moment of poor judgment. But as she moved through her week, watering her garden, volunteering at the church thrift shop, exchanging calls with friends, the sting of being left out refused to fade. At the grocery store, Evelyn ran into her friend Doris, a sharp-witted woman with 7 grandchildren and a knack for reading people. Doris asked how the reunion went, and Evelyn tried to sound cheerful. "Oh, you know." Linda really pulled out all the stops. "It was elegant." Doris narrowed her eyes. "But..." Evelyn hesitated, then confessed, They took a big family photo and asked me to sit it out. Just the younger generation, they said. Doris's jaw dropped. You left out of your own family's photo? I hope you told them what you thought. Evelyn shook her head, embarrassed. I just stood there and tried not to make a fuss. Maybe I should have said something. But I didn't want to ruin their day. Doris huffed, her outrage burning on Evelyn's behalf. Sometimes, people need to know they've gone too far. Evelyn spent the afternoon replaying that conversation. For years, she'd worked hard to avoid conflict, smoothing over rough edges, letting others' happiness come before her own. She'd prided herself on being the peacekeeper. But sitting in the quiet of her sunlit kitchen, she wondered what all that peacekeeping had cost her. Later that week, she got a group text from Linda with a link to the photo album. Dozens of glossy, staged images from the reunion. Evelyn scrolled through them, watching her family smile in perfectly arranged rows, her children, her grandchildren, even Linda's in-laws. The only evidence of Evelyn's presence were a few candid shots, blurry and off to the side. She didn't reply. She just closed her laptop and walked outside. The air was thick with the scent of lilacs, her late husband's favorite flower. She wandered to the edge of the yard, remembering when the kids were small, sticky hands, scraped knees, endless questions about the world. Evelyn realized how much she missed being needed, being seen. The next morning, she called her attorney, a patient woman named Ms. Heller who had managed the Drake family affairs for years. I'd like to discuss my will, Evelyn said simply. Ms. Heller set an appointment for Friday. Evelyn pulled out her file folder labeled Important Papers, Wills, Birth Certificates, a list of family treasures and their histories. She sat at the dining table for hours, reviewing what she'd planned to leave to each child, each grandchild. With every bequest, she remembered the holidays, the birthdays, the times she'd loaned money or offered her home as a refuge. She remembered the times she'd felt taken for granted, the growing sense that her family saw her as a fixture rather than a person. The next day, Evelyn met with Ms. Heller, who greeted her kindly. "What's on your mind, Evelyn?" Evelyn took a breath, feeling the weight of her decision. "I want to make some changes. I need to make sure my will reflects how I really feel." Ms. Heller listened as Evelyn explained, without bitterness, just honesty, how she'd felt overlooked. She wanted her will to be a message, a record of who she was and what she valued. They talked through every detail, and for the first time in years, Evelyn felt a sense of agency. She wasn't acting out of spite, she was acting out of self-respect. Ms. Heller smiled as she took notes. "You're entitled to be heard, Evelyn. It's your legacy." Evelyn left the office lighter. On her way home, she stopped by the bakery and bought herself a chocolate éclair. She ate it slowly on a bench downtown, feeling the richness of the moment, a small pleasure she'd chosen for herself, with no one else in mind. That evening, she called her sister in Arizona, someone who always knew how to listen. "Do you ever feel like you're invisible?" she asked. Her sister answered, "Sometimes you have to remind people you're there. And sometimes, you have to remind yourself first." As Evelyn hung up, she decided she would do just that. She would no longer let herself be cropped out, of photographs, of memories, or of her own story. Evelyn awoke the next morning with a new sense of purpose. The pain of exclusion was still there, sharp and raw, but it had shifted, now laced with determination. She spent the day cleaning out closets and drawers, sorting through years of accumulated belongings. Each item carried a story, a memory of laughter or heartbreak, and as she worked, Evelyn made mental notes about what truly mattered and what she could let go. She called her old friend Margaret, inviting her over for tea. Margaret arrived with a plate of shortbread and an easy smile. As they sat in the sunroom, Evelyn spoke openly about the reunion, the photograph, and her decision to change her will. Margaret listened intently, her eyes full of empathy. "It's not about revenge," Evelyn said, voice steady. "It's about making sure the people I care about actually care about me, too." Margaret nodded. "You have every right to draw the line. Maybe it's time they remember who started this family, and why it still matters." That afternoon, Evelyn began to draft letters, one for each child and grandchild. She wrote honestly, recalling their shared joys and disappointments, describing the love that had built the family but also the sadness of being left out. She did not threaten, did not blame, but instead explained what she valued and what she hoped they would remember when she was gone. Each letter was placed in a sealed envelope, marked with their names, and tucked safely in her desk. As the week passed, Evelyn started to notice subtle changes in her daily life. She felt less anxious about pleasing others and more confident making choices for herself. She went to the movies alone for the first time in years, choosing a film no one else in the family would have liked. She bought herself a bouquet of fresh tulips at the farmer's market and joined a painting class at the local community center. In these small acts, she reclaimed space for herself. Acts that once would have seemed selfish now felt essential. On Sunday, Linda called, her voice bright and hurried. "Mom, the reunion photos turned out so well. I'll send you the prints." Evelyn paused before answering, choosing her words with care. "Linda, I saw the album online. I noticed I wasn't included in the family photo." Linda stammered, caught off guard. "Oh, well, it was just for the kids and their families, Mom. I didn't think you'd mind. I'm sorry if—" Evelyn interrupted, gently but firmly. "It did hurt. I want you to know that." For the first time in years, Evelyn sensed a shift, a hesitation, a moment of real listening from her daughter. Linda apologized, awkwardly, promising to do better next time. Evelyn thanked her and ended the call feeling lighter. She realized that being honest about her feelings, instead of swallowing them for the sake of peace, had brought a quiet kind of strength. The next day, Evelyn visited Ms. Heller again, reviewing the final details of her revised will. She decided to leave cherished family heirlooms to friends and organizations that had brought her joy, a silver locket to Margaret, her grandmother's quilt to the local history museum, a donation to the community garden where she'd found peace. Her remaining assets would be divided differently now, with clear instructions to honor her wishes. Later that week, she joined her painting class, laughing with new friends as she tried her hand at watercolor landscapes. She found comfort in the colors, the freedom of expressing herself without fear of judgment. One evening, as the sun set in ribbons of orange and gold, Evelyn sat on her porch with a cup of tea. She watched children ride bicycles down the street, the distant sound of laughter drifting on the breeze. She felt the ache of loss, yes, but also the fullness of her own life, the boundaries she'd drawn, the promise that she would never again allow herself to be invisible. She wrote in her journal, "To be remembered, sometimes you have to remind the world you're still here." The following week, Evelyn found herself busier than she'd been in years. She organized a luncheon at her church, inviting friends from the community center and even a few neighbors she'd only waved to in passing. The event was lively and warm, the kind of gathering Evelyn loved, laughter echoing off the fellowship hall's high ceilings, homemade casseroles and stories passed around the table. She felt fully present, not out of obligation, but out of choice. After the luncheon, Evelyn walked with Margaret through the park, sharing her latest painting and the progress she'd made on her will. "It's strange," Evelyn admitted, "how good it feels to take control of my story again." Margaret squeezed her arm. "You're building a new legacy, one that says your presence matters." At home, Evelyn received a flurry of calls and messages from her family, prompted by the photos Linda had sent out. Her granddaughter Jenny called, bubbly and sweet, to thank her for a birthday card. Her youngest son, Roger, texted a quick update about a work promotion. Yet, for the first time, Evelyn felt less pressure to keep everyone connected and more freedom to enjoy the contact on her terms. She responded warmly, but did not chase anyone for longer conversations. Linda, perhaps sensing a shift, dropped by unannounced with pastries and coffee. The visit was awkward at first, conversation stilted. Eventually, they moved to the backyard, watching birds flit through the late summer light. "I'm sorry, Mom," Linda said, her voice tentative. "I wasn't thinking when we took that photo. I didn't mean to hurt you." Evelyn looked at her daughter, really seeing her as an adult, not just as a child needing forgiveness. "I know, Linda. I just hope you understand that it did hurt, and I need to know that I matter to you, not just as a memory, but as a person." They talked honestly for the first time in years, about expectations, disappointments, and the roles they'd all been playing. Linda admitted she'd felt overwhelmed by hosting, always trying to impress everyone and missing what truly mattered. Evelyn offered forgiveness but did not retreat from her new boundaries. As summer waned, Evelyn spent more time with her new friends, exploring art shows and local concerts. She volunteered to teach a class on genealogy at the library, sharing her love for family history with others who wanted to find their roots. Meanwhile, Ms. Heller finalized the new will, and Evelyn wrote a personal letter to accompany it. In her words, she explained her choices, not as punishment, but as a reflection of her values and what she'd learned about herself and her family. "I want my memory to mean more than a photograph," she wrote. "I want it to mean that I lived fully, gave freely, and mattered." One evening, Evelyn hosted Margaret, Doris, and a few neighbors for a movie night at home. They watched an old comedy, shared popcorn and stories, and filled her living room with easy laughter. When everyone had left, Evelyn lingered in the quiet, soaking in the contentment of a night well spent. She sat at her kitchen table, pen in hand, and wrote in her journal. "A life is measured not by who remembers you, but by how deeply you remember yourself." Evelyn smiled, knowing she was building memories that no photograph could ever crop out. September brought cool mornings and golden light through Evelyn's kitchen windows. For years, she'd greeted autumn with a sense of nostalgia, but this year, there was something new: anticipation. She signed up for a genealogy seminar at the library, where she was quickly embraced by a group of retirees eager to swap stories about ancestors, immigration papers, and lost family recipes. Evelyn shared the tale of her grandmother's silver locket, a family treasure she'd just willed to the local museum. The group was fascinated, and Evelyn felt the unique pride of having something special to contribute. Margaret convinced her to join a walking club that met at the park every Thursday morning. The walks were brisk and filled with lively talk. One member, a widower named Frank, took a special interest in Evelyn's stories. He invited her for coffee after a walk, and they found themselves lingering over their mugs, sharing memories and laughter. Evelyn was surprised at the lightness she felt in Frank's company, a sense of possibility she hadn't expected. Meanwhile, her family remained on the periphery. Roger visited one weekend, bringing his wife and children for lunch. They ate on the patio, the kids running through piles of leaves as Evelyn and Roger caught up. She sensed his genuine affection, but also noticed he didn't ask about family traditions or bring up the reunion photo. Evelyn found herself less inclined to fill the silence with reminders of what had been lost. Linda called more frequently, sometimes just to check in, sometimes with small updates about her job or the grandchildren's milestones. Their conversations were gentler now. Linda tried harder, listening as much as she spoke. Still, Evelyn kept her boundaries clear, enjoying the contact but not chasing after deeper connection. She recognized that it was up to her family to bridge the gap they'd created. The biggest change came on a chilly Friday evening, when Evelyn attended the church's annual charity dinner. She brought a homemade pie and was delighted when it was the first dessert to disappear. She chatted with old friends, accepted compliments on her painting now displayed in the hallway, and watched Frank lead the auction with his easy humor. Toward the end of the evening, Frank found her by the punch bowl. "You know, Evelyn, I'd like to see that family history book of yours sometime," he said. "Maybe you could help me track down my great-uncle's records. I could bring pastries next week." Evelyn felt a quiet thrill, a door opening, just for her. "I'd like that very much," she replied. That night, at home, Evelyn reflected on how much had changed since the day she'd stood, invisible, at the edge of her family's photo. Her world had expanded, not through anger, but through choosing herself. She no longer waited for others to define her place. She carved it out with every new friendship, every small adventure, every honest conversation. She wrote in her journal, "I gave my heart freely, and it hurt to see it set aside. But now I know I can choose where I give it, and who is worthy to receive it." As the leaves continued to fall, Evelyn realized that the story of her life was far from finished. She was writing new chapters, ones where she could never again be cropped out. October rolled in, brisk and bright. Evelyn found her calendar fuller than it had been in years. Mondays were now for the genealogy group, where she delighted in piecing together family stories, her own and others. Thursdays brought the walking club and coffee with Frank, whose dry humor and gentle curiosity became the highlight of her week. Frank visited one afternoon, bringing pastries and a stack of his grandfather's old letters. They spread the papers across Evelyn's dining table, their heads bent close together as they deciphered faded ink and speculated about long-lost relatives. 4 hours, laughter and the scent of cinnamon filled the house, a far cry from the quiet, anxious evenings Evelyn had grown used to. Margaret, ever the instigator, encouraged Evelyn to enter one of her paintings in the local fall arts show. At first, Evelyn hesitated, convinced her watercolors were only good for decorating her own kitchen. But with Margaret and Frank's support, she submitted a landscape of her childhood home. When she visited the gallery opening, she was surprised to see her painting proudly displayed, a red ribbon hanging beneath it. Visitors stopped to admire her work, and one woman even asked if Evelyn would give lessons. The invitations for family Thanksgiving arrived in the mail, as they always did. Linda's note was careful, a bit formal, inviting Evelyn to join the gathering and help with the pies. Evelyn smiled at the gesture, recognizing both the effort and the distance. She accepted, but this year she went on her own terms, bringing her favorite pie, her new stories, and a sense of independence she refused to set aside. The family home felt familiar, but Evelyn noticed how much had changed. During dinner, the grandchildren talked about sports and school, the adults swapped news about work and vacations. When Linda suggested a family photo, this time Evelyn was included, placed squarely in the center with everyone crowded around her. The photographer snapped several pictures, but Evelyn felt a bittersweet pang. She knew her inclusion was partly prompted by her earlier honesty, not tradition. Still, she was there, seen, if not fully understood. After dessert, Roger asked to see her new painting. Jenny showed off her own art from school, and for a few moments, Evelyn felt a bridge rebuilding between generations. But she also felt the boundaries she'd set, the knowledge that her value did not depend on these fleeting gestures. When she returned home that evening, Evelyn found herself reflecting on the new circle she'd built. Frank called to check if she'd made it home safely, and Margaret sent a late-night text with a picture from their last walk. Evelyn realized she was no longer waiting for her family to fill the empty spaces. She'd filled them herself, with people who chose her just as she was. She wrote in her journal, "Joy is a garden you tend for yourself. Visitors are welcome, but they cannot be the roots." With the fall wind tapping at her window and the warmth of new friendships blossoming around her, Evelyn felt something she hadn't in years, real contentment. November brought both an early chill and a surge of excitement. Evelyn's painting class elected her to organize a show-and-tell night at the community center. The idea daunted her, but with encouragement from Margaret and Frank, she agreed. She spent afternoons planning, calling classmates, arranging refreshments, and designing flyers. On the night of the event, the room buzzed with anticipation and the aroma of homemade cookies. Evelyn opened the program with a few words, just enough to welcome everyone and calm her nerves. Artists, crafters, and even a local musician shared their work. When it was her turn, Evelyn displayed her watercolor landscapes and read a short essay about the importance of being seen. The applause was loud, and afterward, strangers approached her with praise and thanks. For the first time, she saw herself not only as a participant but as a leader, someone who brought people together. Frank, standing off to the side, gave her a quiet thumbs up and walked her home afterward. They talked about plans for the winter, museum trips, a possible holiday potluck with the walking group, and maybe even a weekend at the seaside. Evelyn found herself looking forward to these things, not because they would fill a void, but because she genuinely wanted to share them. Thanksgiving came and went, quieter than years past. Evelyn attended Linda's gathering but chose to leave early, excusing herself for a movie night with friends. She didn't feel guilty, she felt free. In December, she received an invitation from the library to teach a winter genealogy workshop. She accepted, excited to share her skills with others seeking connection. The first session was a success. Participants listened eagerly as Evelyn guided them through census records and family trees, her voice steady and sure. Her relationship with her family remained cordial but distant. Linda called to ask for her cranberry bread recipe, Roger texted photos of the grandchildren in the snow, and Jenny sent a holiday card with a bright drawing on the front. Evelyn responded warmly but briefly, no longer bending over backward for a deeper connection that didn't come. Instead, her days were full: art classes, winter walks with Frank and Margaret, coffee dates, and lively group dinners. Her circle of friends gave her what she'd always craved: acceptance, laughter, and a sense of being needed for who she was, not for what she provided. One snowy evening, after a dinner at Frank's, Evelyn found herself standing at her own front door, reluctant to end the night. Frank reached for her hand and said softly, "You're a remarkable woman, Evelyn. I hope you know that." She smiled, her heart swelling, not with longing for what was lost, but with gratitude for what she'd found. Later, she sat at her kitchen table, journaling as the wind rattled the windows. "I am not an afterthought. I am the beginning of every new story I choose to tell." Winter settled outside, but inside, Evelyn's world was warm and full, a testament to the life she'd built, one no one could ever crop her out of again. The year drew to a close with snow swirling over Evelyn's neighborhood, blanketing her home and garden in shimmering white. She spent the holidays immersed in her chosen circle, exchanging small, meaningful gifts with Margaret and Frank, baking for her genealogy students, and attending a joyful New Year's Eve dinner with her art group. The night was filled with laughter and stories, a stark contrast to the loneliness she'd once feared. One afternoon, Evelyn received an official letter from Ms. Heller, confirming the updates to her will and enclosing copies for her records. Evelyn read the documents carefully, her hand steady. Her decisions were clear. Treasured heirlooms and savings would pass to those who had offered real love, support, and respect: friends, community organizations, and charities she believed in. To her family, she left heartfelt letters explaining her choices, honest but free of bitterness, each word a gentle reminder that love is both a gift and a responsibility. Linda called in late January, her tone subdued. She'd learned from Ms. Heller about the changes to the will. "I wish things had been different, Mom," she said, voice wavering. Evelyn answered gently, "So do I, Linda. But sometimes you have to choose yourself first." There were no arguments, only a quiet understanding. The call ended with tentative plans for coffee in the spring. Evelyn's days remained full. She led genealogy workshops at the library, painted winter landscapes in her sunny kitchen, and walked arm in arm with Frank through the snowy park, savoring each step. The small house she once feared would be too quiet now echoed with friendship, creativity, and a self-assurance she'd long denied herself. She hosted a potluck for her closest friends, the laughter and warmth filling every corner. After the meal, Margaret proposed a toast, "To Evelyn, who reminds us it's never too late to be the center of your own story." As the fire crackled and her friends chatted in the glow, Evelyn looked around and saw the life she'd created, a tapestry woven from courage, honesty, and the choice to never again be invisible. Later, as she journaled by the window, Evelyn wrote, "Legacy is not only what you leave behind, but the life you live in full view. I was excluded, but I have included myself in everything that matters." The snow fell softly, but Evelyn's spirit burned bright. She had taken her place, not on the edge, but at the heart of her own story, for as long as she chose.